There is everything to fight for, and we are fighting for every single seat in this country. The polls have been wrong before,
Mm.
but I think it's perfectly legitimate to say the country doesn't function well when you get majorities the size of Blair's or even bigger. And we would say there are a lot of very good, hardworking MPs who can hold the government of the day to account.
Okay.
And we'd say those are Conservative MPs.
The Conservatives face a landslide. Who says so? The Conservatives. Social media ads are warning they might only win 57 seats in the election. Is that a good way to win back votes or a self-fulfilling prophecy? Let's speak to the Defence Secretary, Grant Shapps. Good morning to you.
Morning.
You're very much the man the Conservatives bring out when there's a bit of a crisis. And we wonder, is the crisis this morning that, according to your own online ads, that you might be heading for just 57 MPs by your own admission?
I think the simple point is that if you want to make sure that in this next government, whoever forms it, that there's a proper system of accountability, then we would argue that you don't want to have somebody receive a supermajority. And in this case, of course, the concern would be that if Keir Starmer were to go into number 10, it will either be Rishi Sunak or Keir Starmer. There's no other outcome to this election. And that power was in some way unchecked. It would be very bad news for people in this country. A blank check approach allowing someone to do anything they wanted, particularly when their particular set of plans are so vague. I mean, they say change, but you've no idea what they actually want to change to, other than the fact that they've outlined plans which would cost £2,094 to every working family in this country.
Right, we'll
And
come
that's
to
really
that.
what we're
Yeah,
warning about.
we'll come to that in a second. The £2,094. It does sound like you are conceding that that you don't want the opposition, which sounds like it's going to be you guys. You don't want it to be too small. Is that the right psychology? It's not fighting talk. It's kind of campaign fear.
Well, I'm not really sort of getting into the kind of processology of it, but it is a fact, of course, that if you ended up with a party with a massive majority, unchecked power, able to do anything that they wanted, and with the instincts of, we would argue, with Keir Starmer's party on all sorts of things, from raising people's tax to their lack of support for increased defence spending, we think that would be a dangerous place to put this country. No one's cast a vote. No one has, as I'm aware of so far, even postal votes haven't gone out. There is everything to fight for, and we are fighting for every single seat in this country. The polls have been wrong before, but I think it's perfectly legitimate to say the country doesn't function well when you get majorities the size of Blair's or even bigger. And we would say there are a lot of very good, hardworking MPs who can hold the government of the day to account.
Okay.
And we'd say those are Conservative MPs.
Now, you mentioned the £2,094 figure, which you say is what Labour's plans will cost working households over the next 4 years. They say that's a lie. And that Rishi Sunak was lying when he said that. I know that you are doubling down on that. Labour have said that your manifesto means an extra £4,800 on people's mortgages. So what do you say to that? Is that a lie?
Well, but first of all, our figures are from either Treasury official numbers or from Labour's own numbers. They immediately said, but not all from Treasury officials. No, that's right. Some of them are from Labour's own numbers.
Okay.
So the figure is correct. And I've actually gone into this in great detail, looked at it in great detail. The £2,094, every single working household, is correct. Now, when Labour look at our figures, they assume that we'll make none of the savings, for example, from welfare that we announced yesterday, even though the welfare budget has ballooned since COVID. They themselves say it's impossible to actually make any reduction in the welfare budget. Well, there's about £34 billion there, and we're only
But
proposing to take about
okay,
12 billion.
but Grant
So,
Shapps, with all these kind of projections that all politicians do, there are so many assumptions baked into all of them. I mean, the £2,094 figure that you put out, that has assumptions. Of course it does, because it's stuff that might happen in the future, were Labour to win, where there are plans to come in, where certain things to happen. I mean, everything has assumptions, not
Right,
just
look,
Labour.
look, I think that's it's wrong and unfair. If Labour go out and they say we're going to do these things, in this case, 27 different things,
Mm,
and here are the costs that either they are publishing or they've been costed independently, and it adds up to £2,000 per family,
mm.
that is the cost of it. I mean, there isn't like another way of looking at that. And the idea that Labour go around refuting it uh, without disowning the policies
Okay,
that they've attempted
okay. Let's.
means that it
Oh,
will cost families £2,000. If you think Labour's going to win,
mm,
it makes sense to start saving because
right.
that is what the cost will be.
Oh, well, here's something that might be up your street. The National Service policy that's in the manifesto. Rachel Reeves says they don't add up. She says that they emit the cost of equipment, accommodation, training 30,000 new recruits. Actually, it would cost double. So it's difficult, really, for people who are thinking about casting votes on the strength of manifestos, because they have projections with assumptions, and then they have half-costed policies. What do you say to Rachel Reeves on that
What
accusation?
I would encourage anyone to do, we published our manifesto yesterday, and alongside we published a document which actually provides all of those detailed costings. So we actually show precisely how things will be paid for.
But
And I
did you omit those things? Did you omit the cost of equipment, accommodation, and
no,
training?
no, no, everything is and everything's in there. And I'd
Well, she
encourage
says you
anyone to,
did.
you know, as I say, that she doesn't think there's any savings to be made from the welfare budget, which has ballooned, which I think tells you everything about the way that Labour would go about running this country. In the case of defence, where we plan to spend 2.5% of our gross domestic product, so and Labour haven't backed this, but we would increase the amount we're spending on defence in a much more dangerous world. We said we'll pay for that by, in most part, by reducing the size of the civil service down to where it was before COVID. Labour refused to do that. So they won't cut the welfare bill. They won't cut the size of the civil service. They will increase your family's tax by 2 grand.
Um, let's get away from all the figures, because it's a lot of figures, and people, I think, are a bit confused really about what they should believe. Maybe they've already made up their own minds. Rishi Sunak said yesterday that he understood that people were frustrated with the Conservatives and that they were frustrated with him. He said he understood that. Why do you think that some people who might be thinking about voting Conservative are frustrated with Rishi
Mm.
Sunak?
Well, look, I knock on a lot of doors and I understand how people are feeling. And,
Well, what do they say
it
to
has
you?
been, well, usually the conversation goes something like this. This has been an incredibly difficult time. I can't think of a government in history that's had to deal with a once in a 100-year pandemic, followed by a war in Europe in that order, and then to recover the economy from, for example, the huge spike in inflation that all of the world experienced,
Of
but
course, but
thanks to Putin's.
you are also a party
Yeah.
though who's had three leaders in a very short space of time. I mean, that's self-inflicted, isn't it?
Well, as I say, I don't think anyone's saying that we have been perfect and we're not going out to say that. But
Mm.
a great example of this is a woman whose door I knocked on last night. I didn't know what she was going to say. It was in Welwyn Garden, in my constituency. And she said to me, people seem to forget that these are global issues. People seem to forget that you've had 14 years, but so has the Labour Party had 14 years to come up with a single idea. And she was saying this to me. I can't think of a single thing that they've said they are going to do, apart from, she said, apparently yesterday, have classes of kids brushing their teeth. Regardless of whether they brush their teeth already in the morning. I don't understand what their plan is because
Okay.
they've had all of
But
this time and they
that's fine.
haven't
That's
come up
fine.
with
But the
anything.
original question is, and I'm really interested I'm genuinely interested in what
Mm.
you think about this, because you do, we appreciate you really do think about these things. We feel that when you come on this program. Why do you think people are frustrated? Specifically with Rishi Sunak, because this is a very presidential election campaign. It's Rishi Sunak front and centre. So why are people frustrated with him? Can you explain why?
Well, I think it is all that backdrop. We've been through very, very difficult times. We've had to do some very difficult things. People would be frustrated because they don't want to have had experienced the inflation we went through. They would have wanted the tax cuts that we've now been able to bring in on things like national insurance. sooner. And we've been able to say now that we'll scrap all national insurance for people who are self-employed and carry on reducing it for all workers. But people would have wanted that stuff to happen quicker. It's been a very difficult, frustrating period. But it's very easy to stand on the sidelines and snipe about these things. And as I say, I think that what has been so impressive is the Prime Minister is prepared to take responsibility. He will take the difficult decisions
Okay.
and then still come out with a really bold program for the future, which I have to say, if you are a young person and you are looking to buy a house and you'll be able to get a house with a 5% deposit, no stamp duty permanently, first time buyers on homes
Okay.
under 450,000. If you're a pensioner, you won't pay a tax on your state pension, which Labour is about to bring in because they haven't ruled out they haven't ruled it out. So they are therefore about to tax pensioners. We remember that
Well.
from pensions before.
No, they haven't said that, and we don't know that. But I understand your point. Thank you very much
Well,
for talking.
they've said they wouldn't raise the tax-free amount for pensioners, meaning that pensioners would for the first time ever start paying tax on their state pension. We remember their 75p
Okay.
increase to pensioners. They've got form on this.
All right, Grant Shapps, we'll have to let you go because you've got to go to another interview. Thank you very much for talking to us. That's the Defence Secretary, Grant Shapps.